Make the African Union a force to fight against neocolonialism. Dear Africans, when Africa was invaded by the Europeans in the 19th century, each people tried to defend themselves by their own means against the invaders. All countries were defeated and prostrated before the yoke of the colonizer except Ethiopia. One of the elements that characterized this war was every man for himself, and God for all. However, there were no Africans who were accomplices against others. This is not the case today with neocolonialism, because since 1990, it is the Africans who have become the labor forces of the neocolonialists. They made a pact with them to help them with this evil project. Today, the great misfortune of Africans is that in the new war against those who are maliciously recolonizing Africa, the main actors of this diabolical work are the Africans themselves, especially those of the Great Lakes who were trained to carry out a pharaonic project of recolonizing Africa from Cape Town to Alexandria. Dear Africans, open your eyes so that the hypocritical diplomacy of the Western elite is blindfolded. Open your eyes and you will see around you black-skinned Africans who serve the interests of the Western elite more than the Western military themselves do. These so-called African military who serve the interests of the Western elite have already conquered several territories in Africa without shooting a bullet. Western diplomacy has blindfolded many African leaders, and they have opened their borders and distributed land or territories to the army of the Western elite, while deceiving themselves that they were African brothers who come to collaborate with them. This army is called Killing Machine, but it is officially called RDF, Rwanda Defense Forces. Its real name should be WEDF, Western Elite Defense Forces. It is not an African army because if it were, it would not be slaughtering African people like it is doing in Rwanda, Congo, Burundi, Mozambique and other countries where the blindfolded by the West do not see their bloody hand. Many think that they are entering their country to provide security. No, dear African leaders. Think again, they did not come to provide security for you. It is to destabilize your country. Mozambique should serve as an example and be the last country to fall into this trap of the Western elite. They came as black skin settlers to reinstall the regime of the cunning colonizer. Many African governments have already fallen into this trap, and they have distributed their lands or territories to the army of the Western elite, the so-called Rwanda Defense Forces. These bloodthirsty soldiers entered without firing a bullet. However, to get out, a war will be necessary, because they came to appropriate these territories or even your entire country. If you want them to leave, you will be forced to go to war against them. Everyone knows that only God knows the outcome of the war. You who have not yet fallen into this trap, you have already been warned. Forewarned is forearmed. Dear Africans, the time has come to get rid of this traitorous army that is massacring Africans in the name of the interests of the Western elite. You all know that this army has not stopped massacring Africans, especially since October 1st, 1990, when they attacked one of the smallest countries in Africa with the complicity of neighboring countries that have never asked Africans for forgiveness for the support they gave to the neo-colonizers ready to kill all Africans to preserve their political and economic interests. The African countries that supported the invasion of Rwanda in 1990 are known. They should retract and ask for forgiveness from Africans for supporting the inauguration of the new colonization of Africa. Dear Africans, it is time to correct the mistakes and build a truly united Africa. To do this, let all countries that have not yet received the Western blindfold come together to liberate the countries occupied maliciously or effectively by the defense forces of the Western elite. The so-called Rwanda Defense Forces, RDF. Everything should start at the beginning. It was Rwanda that was the first country to be occupied by these Western forces. It is Rwanda that should be the first country to be liberated by Africans, because today's Rwanda is the source of wars in Africa. Africans must come together to put an end to this expansionist and imperialist project of the Western elite that declared war on them by proxy. All countries attacked maliciously or officially by this army of the Western elite should be helped by all neighbors in this war. We must help the DRC. We must help Mozambique. We must help the CAR. We must help Congo-Brazzaville. We must help South Sudan and North Sudan. We must help Kenya. In short, we must help all the countries of East Africa. Because the misfortune began with them at the time when the other Africans were only playing the role of spectator or so-called mediator, as in the case of Lorenzo, instead of openly entering into war against this army of the Western elite that does not want to negotiate with anyone but confiscate everything as it did in Rwanda. Indeed, when this army of the Western elite enters negotiations, it is a distraction maneuver to deceive the vigilance of their enemies. In fact, when they are in negotiations in Luanda, it is their opportune moment to strike hardest in Nyiragongo or elsewhere. Angola should get rid of the mediator's hat that the Western elite gave it as a poisoned gift. Angola should become aware of the danger that threatens its neighbors, because today it is the DRC, tomorrow it is Angola that will be attacked. This is why all Africans must rise as one man to drive this Western army of black skin out of Africa. All Africans must fight all and at the same time against these enemies of all who want to tear everything away from Africans.